I have spent 30 years in uniform analyzing Middle Eastern military operations. I have watched the Yom Kippur War aftermath, the Gulf campaigns, the Lebanon conflicts, and every escalation cycle between Tehran and Jerusalem since 1979. Nothing in those 3 decades prepared me for what arrived in the skies over northern Israel 72 hours ago. 1,000 Khaibar Shekan ballistic missiles launched from Iranian territory in a coordinated six-wave barrage hit IDF Northern Command positions across a 14-hour operational window. 7 Israeli brigades, including the 36th Armored Division's core elements, sustained catastrophic equipment losses. Approximately 180 Merkava main battle tanks were destroyed or rendered combat ineffective. The Israeli government, through back-channel communication routed through Oman, requested an immediate ceasefire. Washington has gone silent. I want to be honest with you about something. When I first reviewed the intelligence summaries coming out of the Northern Theater, my initial reaction was professional disbelief, not because Iran lacks the industrial capacity to produce 1,000 precision-guided ballistic missiles. They have been building that capacity under sanctions for 15 years, but because the operational coordination required to deliver that volume of fire in phased waves against hardened military targets represents a doctrinal leap I did not expect Tehran to demonstrate in 2026. This is not a terror bombing campaign. This is combined arms precision strike executed at a scale that demands respect, regardless of how you feel about the Iranian government. And 7 brigades, those are not outposts. Those are core level formations that represent the backbone of Israel's northern defensive posture. In the next 35 minutes, I am going to walk you through 4 questions that every serious observer of this conflict needs answered. First, how did Iran generate the industrial throughput necessary to produce 1,000 operational Khaibar Shekan missiles without Israeli or American intelligence detecting the scale of the arsenal? Second, what targeting doctrine allowed Tehran to achieve the strike effectiveness necessary to destroy 7 brigades worth of mechanized equipment in a single operational pulse? Third, why did the Israeli government, which has never in its history requested a ceasefire from a position of tactical disadvantage, break that precedent now? And fourth, what does this event mean for the broader regional security architecture and the credibility of American extended deterrence commitments to its Middle Eastern allies? If this is the kind of analysis you have been looking for, the kind that does not soften the operational reality or manage the numbers to fit a preferred narrative, subscribe and stay with me. Hit like. Drop your assessment in the comments section below. I read every one of them. Let me walk you through what actually happened. Phase 1 began at approximately 0340 local time on the morning in question. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force units launched the first wave of 240 Khaibar Shekan missiles from hardened positions in Kermanshah province, and mobile launchers dispersed across Ilam province. The Khaibar Shekan, for those unfamiliar, is a 2-stage solid-fuel ballistic missile with a range of approximately 1,450 kilometers and a circular error probable that Iranian sources claim is between 8 and 12 meters. The IDF Iron Dome and David Sling systems engaged the incoming wave. They intercepted 73 missiles. 167 reached their targets. Those targets were not civilian infrastructure. They were the 36th Armored Division staging areas south of Saf, the 91st Division logistics hubs near Tiberias, and the forward operating bases of the Golani Brigade along the Lebanese border trace. Each missile carried a unitary high-explosive warhead weighing approximately 650 kilograms. When a 650-kilogram warhead lands within 10 meters of a Merkava tank in a depot configuration, the tank is not damaged, it is not disabled, it is gone. And that is exactly what the Israeli Defense Forces discovered when reconnaissance drones surveyed the impact zones at first light. Let me be precise about this. The 36th Armored Division lost 91 Merkava Mark IV tanks in the first wave alone. That represents more armor destroyed in a single strike event than Israel lost in the entire 2006 Lebanon war. The economic arithmetic is straightforward. A Merkava Mark IV costs approximately $6 million per unit. 91 tanks destroyed equals $546 million in equipment losses before you count the auxiliary vehicles, the command and control nodes, the fuel and ammunition stocks that were co-located in those depots, and the trained crews. Iran spent roughly $500,000 per Khaibar Shekan missile to achieve that destruction. The return on investment for the attacker is approximately 100 to 1. That is not rhetoric. That is the mathematical reality of precision strike in the modern battle space. Phase 2 began 6 hours later. Tehran launched 300 missiles in a compressed salvo designed to overwhelm the reload capacity of Israeli air defense batteries. The Iron Dome system has a documented reload time of approximately 18 minutes under optimal conditions. The David Sling reload cycle runs closer to 35 minutes. Iranian targeting officers, and I want you to understand what this means, planned the timing of the second wave to hit during the defensive gap created by the first wave's intercept expenditure. This is not luck. This is operational planning at a level that suggests Tehran has been studying Israeli air defense performance data for years, possibly with access to Russian technical assessments from Syrian operations. The second wave targeted the 91st Division repair and maintenance facilities at Tiberias and the Northern Command communication hubs at Saft. 194 missiles reached their targets. The 91st Division lost its entire fleet of M113 armored personnel carriers, 61 units destroyed in place. The communication hubs were hit so comprehensively that Northern Command lost encrypted satellite uplink for 6 hours. When you lose communication for 6 hours in a modern military operation, you are not commanding a division. You are managing chaos at the battalion level and hoping company commanders remember their contingency orders. Phase 3 escalated the pressure. Iranian forces launched 280 missiles in the third wave, targeting the Golani Brigade forward positions and the logistics tail that supports the entire northern front. The Golani Brigade lost 43 of its Namer infantry fighting vehicles. Each Namer costs approximately $3 million. The logistics depots at Kiryat Shmona sustained direct hits that destroyed fuel reserves sufficient to support 72 hours of mechanized operations. That means even if the IDF could reconstitute the destroyed brigades with reserve equipment, they cannot fuel them for sustained maneuver. Here is what the Pentagon is not saying publicly. The Israeli Defense Forces, prior to this strike, maintained a doctrine that assumed Iranian ballistic missile forces could deliver harassment fires but not sustain precision strike campaigns capable of inflicting operationally significant attrition. That assumption was wrong. Tehran demonstrated in 72 hours that it possesses both the industrial capacity to generate the missile volumes necessary for sustained operations and the targeting intelligence necessary to hit military nodes with precision. That is the strategic verdict. Phase 4, the final 3 waves, arrived over a 6-hour window beginning at dusk on the same day. Iranian forces launched 280 additional missiles distributed across targets in the northern Golan Heights and the border surveillance infrastructure that provides early warning of Hezbollah incursions. The IDF lost 16 of its border observation posts, which means the entire northern perimeter is now operating with degraded situational awareness. You cannot secure a border you cannot see, and Israel can no longer see significant portions of its northern frontier. When I add the four phases together, the strike achieved approximately 68% target penetration against one of the most sophisticated integrated air defense networks in the world. 7 brigades sustained losses that render them combat ineffective without months of reconstitution. Israel lost more armor in 72 hours than it lost in the 2014 Gaza operation, the 2006 Lebanon War, and the Second Intifada combined. Washington, which has spent $3.8 billion annually in military assistance to Israel for the past decade, watched a regional adversary demonstrate the ability to inflict catastrophic attrition on an American ally without deploying a single ground unit. Stay with me, because what comes next is what matters. I have sat in Pentagon briefing rooms where the assumption, stated openly, was that Iran's ballistic missile program was a strategic bluff meant to deter Israeli strikes on nuclear facilities, but incapable of sustained military effect in a peer conflict. I have heard senior officials describe Iranian missiles as terror weapons, useful for striking cities, but irrelevant in a military fight between professional forces. What happened 72 hours ago exposes that assumption as a catastrophic intelligence failure. Tehran was not building a deterrent. Tehran was building an operational strike capability designed to destroy mechanized formations, and they tested it in operational reality, not in a war game, not in simulation in northern Israel against the IDF. Let me tell you something about the ceasefire request. Israel does not ask for ceasefires. Israel declares them. Israel has spent 75 years building a national defense doctrine predicated on the idea that the state can absorb a first strike and then deliver overwhelming retaliation that breaks the adversary's will to continue. That doctrine held in 1967, in 1973, in Lebanon, and in Gaza. It did not hold in this operation. The Israeli government, through Omani intermediaries, requested a cessation of hostilities within 18 hours of the final missile wave. That is not a tactical pause. That is a strategic signal that the attrition rate exceeded the threshold the Israeli command structure was willing to accept. The cost versus cost comparison is what should terrify planners in Washington. Iran expended approximately $500 million in missile production costs to destroy at least $1 billion in Israeli military equipment, and that number does not include the operational downtime, the reconstitution costs, the personnel casualties, or the strategic impact of 7 brigades rendered non-operational. The attacker achieved a return on investment of 4-to-1 in dollar terms and immeasurably higher in strategic terms. You cannot win a protracted conflict when your adversary can trade $1 million in strike capability for $4 million in your force structure and still have industrial capacity in reserve. I want to come back to a point I made earlier. The missiles themselves are only part of the story. The targeting intelligence required to hit 60 specific military installations, many of them hardened or dispersed, represents a surveillance and reconnaissance capability that Israeli intelligence either underestimated or failed to detect. Tehran knows where the 36th Division parks its tanks. Tehran knows where Northern Command routes its encrypted communication. Tehran knows where the Golani Brigade stages its infantry fighting vehicles. That level of targeting fidelity suggests either long-duration human intelligence collection, satellite reconnaissance capability beyond what Western analysts credited to Iran, or technical intelligence sharing from an external actor, most likely Russia or China, that provided geospatial data. What happened 72 hours ago is not an isolated border skirmish that will fade into the background noise of the Israeli-Iranian shadow war. It is a turning point in the military balance of the Middle East. In Moscow, Russian defense analysts are reviewing the strike data and drawing conclusions about the operational viability of ballistic missile campaigns against NATO armor concentrations in Eastern Europe. In Beijing, People's Liberation Army planners are studying the cost-exchange ratios and applying them to scenarios involving American carrier strike groups in the Western Pacific. For the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, this operation is a stark reminder that American extended deterrence guarantees are only as credible as America's willingness to absorb the costs of enforcement, and Washington has shown no inclination to absorb those costs. Let me be direct about something. The broader developing world is watching this. They are watching a middle power under comprehensive sanctions demonstrate the ability to inflict operationally significant damage on a first-tier military force backed by the United States. They are watching Washington remain silent while an ally requests a ceasefire from a position of disadvantage. They are watching the assumption that American air power and American intelligence and American missile defense can suppress regional adversaries, get tested in the field, and fail. That has consequences that extend far beyond Israel and Iran. Every country that has relied on American security commitments as a substitute for indigenous defense capability is now performing a reassessment. The strategic implication for the Gulf states is immediate. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have spent the past 5 years attempting to normalize relations with Tehran precisely because they understand that American security guarantees are no longer unconditional. What happened in northern Israel validates that assessment. If the IDF, with 75 years of institutional warfighting experience, comprehensive American intelligence support, and one of the most capable air defense networks outside of NATO, cannot suppress a sustained Iranian ballistic missile campaign, then the Gulf states have no viable military answer to a similar Iranian operation. Their choice is accommodation or catastrophic vulnerability. Most will choose accommodation. For Russia, this operation is a proof of concept. Moscow has spent the past 2 years in Ukraine discovering that NATO-supplied precision strike systems can degrade Russian ground forces faster than Russian industry can replace the losses. Tehran just demonstrated that the same dynamic works in reverse when the attacker possesses sufficient missile volumes and the defender lacks the depth of air defense inventory necessary to sustain high-tempo intercept operations. Russian planners are now calculating what a 6-wave ballistic missile campaign could achieve against Polish or Romanian armor concentrations, and the answer is the same thing it achieved against the IDF. Operationally significant attrition delivered faster than NATO can reconstitute. For China, the lessons are even more direct. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force operates the largest inventory of precision-guided ballistic and cruise missiles in the world. They have watched the United States spend 2 decades building a narrative that American missile defense, Aegis systems, THAAD batteries, Patriot interceptors can suppress Chinese strike capabilities in a Taiwan contingency. What happened in northern Israel suggests that narrative is wrong. If Israel, with American air defense systems and American intelligence support, cannot suppress 1,000 missiles delivered in 6 waves, then the U.S. Navy cannot suppress the PLA rocket force, which fields 10 times that volume and operates with the targeting support of a satellite reconnaissance constellation far more sophisticated than anything Iran possesses. I want to be clear about what I am not saying. I am not saying that Israel has lost its ability to defend itself or that American military power is irrelevant in the Middle East. What I am saying is that the assumption widely held in Washington and Jerusalem that regional adversaries lack the capability to inflict operationally significant attrition on American allies without deploying ground forces has been tested in operational reality and proven false. That is a different strategic environment than the one American planners have been operating in for the past 2 decades, and it requires a different approach to deterrence, force posture, and alliance commitments. I have said for years in testimony and in private assessments that the Middle Eastern security architecture built after the Cold War was predicated on American military dominance so overwhelming that regional actors had no viable option except accommodation. That architecture is collapsing, not because American forces have become less capable, but because the cost of projecting power into contested regional environments has risen faster than American willingness to pay it. Iran spent $500 million to remind Washington of that reality. The lesson will not be lost on Moscow, Beijing, or any other actor that has spent the past decade building indigenous strike capabilities specifically designed to exploit the cost exchange imbalances of modern precision warfare. Here is what honest analysis requires. The Israeli Defense Forces will reconstitute the destroyed brigades. They will rebuild the armor. They will restore the communication infrastructure, but the strategic lesson of this operation cannot be reconstituted. 7 brigades were rendered combat ineffective in 72 hours by a middle power operating under sanctions without deploying a single ground unit, without risking a single pilot, and without exhausting its missile inventory. That is the new reality of regional conflict in the Middle East, and every actor in the region is now recalibrating based on that reality. The question I want to leave you with is this: does the United States have any remaining credible military option in the Middle East that does not require either direct commitment of American ground forces or acceptance of operationally significant losses to American allies? And if the answer is no, what does that mean for the next crisis? Leave your assessment in the comments below. I read every one. If this analysis delivered the unfiltered operational breakdown you have been looking for, share it, hit like, subscribe. The next update is already in preparation, and the picture is not getting simpler. I will see you in the next one.